All right, looks like our panel has joined us, and our attendees. Taryn is going to change our attendees to presenters.
Hey,
and
I'll come back in for a second, sorry. While I am working on that, I just wanted to let you know that I'm having a small technical issue that I will totally get worked out really fast. So talk about something for a bit.
We will. Okay. Well, I think what I'll do while Taryn is working out technical difficulties is I will welcome everyone to our event tonight. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Noble. I am an assistant professor in the Criminal Justice Division at Sacramento State University. And I am also the first vice president of the Western Association of Criminal Justice, WACJ. And my co-organizer is Dr. Taryn Vanderpyle. She is our second vice president at WACJ. And the person who we could not have put this together without is Marianne Hudson, our WACJ secretary. Thank you, Marianne. This is a two-night event. And we hope that you will also join us tomorrow for the second part when we will be focusing on research. Tonight we're going to be talking about teaching, sharing strategies and tips for teaching during a pandemic and for teaching criminal justice in times of social unrest. We have two panels tonight. We have 4 presenters on our first panel, and then we'll have a 15-minute break for questions for Q&A. And then we have a second panel with 3 presenters, and we will take another break for more questions for them at the end of that. Before I get started tonight, I did want to introduce Dr. Stephanie Mizrahi, who is here. Stephanie, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And hello, everyone. I just wanted to echo Jennifer and Taryn's welcome, and on behalf of the Western Association of Criminal Justice, I am our Region 5 trustee, so I serve on the executive board of ACJS. I'm also WACJ's conference coordinator. So we're glad to be able to present this and glad to be able to link up with our membership in this sort of somewhat crazy time. Hopefully I'm not speaking too soon. We're hopeful that we will be in Spokane in 2021 and be able to see everybody face to face, and we'll be in Vegas in Reno again in 2022. So just want to say welcome, everybody. Please feel free to contact me if there's anything you'd like me to convey to National or any questions you have. And enjoy the, I won't be able to stay for the entire panel tonight, but did want to drop in and welcome everybody and say thank you very much to Jennifer and to Taryn for putting this together. So welcome and have a good panel.
Thanks, Stephanie. Let's see, a couple technical things. So for our presenters, when you are not presenting, please, of course, mute your microphone. I think that's the Nationals teachers slogan now. And also turn off your camera during the other people's presentations until we do the Q&A. You'll have 15 minutes to do your presentation. I will turn my camera back on, so I will all of a sudden pop back up live, and that will be a warning that your time is coming to an end. For those of you who are attending, please use the Q&A for questions. If you want to submit questions then or during the panel presentations, we will then ask them at the end when we end the first panel, and that way we make sure to get your questions answered. All right, so I think, find my screen again, sorry. All right, Taryn, are we ready to go?
Yep, we're good to go. So Shanell is up and should be able to share her screen now.
Okay, great.
All right. Hi. This virtual world is so weird.
We're getting used to it.
I know. So I'm Shanell Sanchez, and I am an associate professor at Southern Oregon University in Ashland. And I actually have to admit that what I'm sharing tonight is actually something that I learned from my university. We had the opportunity this summer to take classes to make our virtual classes the best they could possibly be. And this idea of a liquid syllabus came to me from that class, which I then took upon myself to try to make one for every single course. And then I'm trying to also share why it's so amazing, and hoping that other people will jump on board. So I'm going to first just kind of go over what a liquid syllabus is, or what they even look like. I didn't actually know when I started taking the class this summer. And then I will show you samples. 2 of them are ones that I have made, and then another is my ideal, what I want mine to look like when I get more experience, since this was my first quarter trying them out. And I'll just kind of talk about what I think is the value, not only to individual faculty, but to departments and universities, because I think there's a real value within these. And so I'm just going to go ahead and show that. Okay, so what I initially thought about when I got so excited about doing these was this what if category. I don't know about all of you, but I've been making, a syllabus every quarter since graduate school, so 2009. And I get bored with it. And so I always try to think of like a fun new comic to put in place, or maybe I'll change my font this quarter to make it more exciting, or, I got a new book list, but it's never exciting for me. I'm also a very visual person. And so I've always just kind of dreaded the let's create the syllabus. And I tend to teach 4 classes every quarter. So I have to do this 4 times over and over. And so when I heard of this possibility, I got super excited. So when I imagined the liquid syllabus, I thought, well, what if my students were excited to view my syllabus instead of just like, oh, it's another one of those I have to read every quarter. Oh, I had her before, it's probably going to be similar. So that was point 1 for me. The other is, what if we're excited to create our syllabus? I can openly say that someone who's not amazing with technology did amazing doing this. It was easy, it's not hard, and it was super fun to personalize it. I also wanted my students to have the opportunity to meet me before class begins, because even though my school is smaller, I still think there's so many times when my first year students haven't even seen me in person. And so I just thought, well, this would be the chance for them to get to hear a little bit about me. And then also I am working on, and I think that I will really promote this for those of you that might take this up, making videos from former students who took that course to share their experience with your course, so that you can also embed that in this liquid syllabus. So maybe the 2-minute video from other students telling what they'll gain if they take this course. And so when you think of the benefits for it, there's a lot, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But first of all, what is a liquid syllabus? I promise I will show examples in just a minute. But it's basically a public website that is our syllabus, but it's not the, take all of what's in your Word document and paste it into the website. It's fun, it's interactive, and I think it's a student-centered learning place where it's aimed at student engagement. And then I also think that it creates this learning environment that is welcoming to the students and kind of breaking down like the barriers between the faculty and the student within reason, right? But so that they feel comfortable, approaching us on day 1. And I also think another reason for me, when I'm really talking about the universities and why I would promote them using them, and I don't think we've thought enough about this, is we want to create our classes as an experience for the students, and especially with being virtual. I've always taught online, since forever, but I've always thought we could do better. And once we went virtual, it really challenged me to think how I can make it better, because I wasn't only now just going to provide online course materials, but I had to engage them weekly and make them excited to come and start. Why not start in week 1? I can also personalize that content for them and really show them, even I'll show you in a minute when I show you my race and crime one, kind of like how this class, what type of direction, maybe what theoretical framework I'm going to be teaching from, what type of personality I have, or what my expectations in the class might be, so that they can decide before they even enroll in the class if they're interested in taking it. At the start of this quarter, I had a lot of students that email, I'm really thinking about race and crime. I haven't decided if I want to take it. Can you send me a syllabus? I'm sure you get that every quarter or semester if you're in the normal part of the world. But I do, and I was like, this is so awesome, because I do have a syllabus to show you, except it's super fun and engaging. So here's my liquid syllabus for you. So that's another. I also spend a lot of time in my classrooms making myself appear to be a human to them. I feel like when I was in college, the professors that I related with the most were the ones that seemed to be relatable and personable, within reason, not sharing too much with them, right? But make you seem a little bit more accessible to them, and that they can come to you when they're struggling. Like currently I have several students experiencing COVID, And I don't think any of them have ever had a hard time coming to me and talking to me about that. And I think that's part of the environment I try to create. And I think these help break that barrier down in week 1. I also think that it can increase our enrollment of classes through our social media sites. So like we can share the liquid syllabus on Twitter, we can share it on the SOU page on Instagram, we can share it on Facebook. It can get tweeted out. I think if we have like a low enrolled class, which we've been struggling with at SOU for some time now, some of our classes, you know, not necessarily CJ, but some of the other programs, they get a little bit lower enrolled and students might not know what it's going to be about. We actually had an adjunct. I'm sorry, she's not an adjunct, she's an assistant professor in econ, and she was cross-teaching an economics and crime course. And our students were just like, I don't even know what that's going to be about. And I think if we would have been able to push this through that social media web frame, that they could see like if this was something of interest to them. And then again, of course, how it would relate to the major. So something to think about is the students love social media. We might not love it, but they do. And so utilize it. And then lastly, I think we could add to the college website for potential students. I think if you're in an administrative role, this would be really great to have on your website, like maybe even below each course catalog, if faculty have one, you just share that liquid syllabus. So for students that are, you know, out there visiting SOU or just playing around with our website, they can click on this and then they get to see more than just our silly pictures that we all take and have on our little page. And, you know, I feel like the websites are geared towards other faculty members, like, oh, look at my research, look at my teaching experience, but the students don't really want to know that. They want to know like what kind of courses you teach, how you're going to teach, what types of books they're going to be reading. And so I think this would be great there. And then lastly, we have to keep up with technology. I think this virtual world we ended up in was a real challenge for some people that hadn't had experience with how to make the class engaging through all the tools that technology offers. And for others like myself who had been, you know, trying to keep up with what the students are doing and interested in, it was just kind of like oh, here we go. Let's just transition pretty quickly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to show you a couple of the examples that I have made, and I'm going to talk about places that you can make them. So I also have on here that I'm going to show you my favorite one. That's my goal. I would love to be able to create this as good as hers. Still working on it. But there's a couple websites that you can use. This Popular is, I think that's how you say it. I just say it like Popular, but it's free. And that's the one I used this time around just to try it out because it was free. And that was the one that they had advised us to use in my course. However, after looking at a little bit more about what other websites can do, I think I will switch to Google, which I'll talk about. Google has a lot more that you can do and a lot more you can embed. But I don't know, you know, what everybody's school uses, but if you use Canvas, you can embed it right through Canvas, so you can make it in Canvas and it gets embedded through your own little, you know, page. We have Moodle and it cannot do that as of now. I'm not sure if it'll move that direction, but SOU does not have Canvas, so we cannot use that. But there's a lot of different platforms out there that you can use. And I just personally just went with the free one. And you don't have to do that, but Google is also free if your university subscribes to it. So I'm going to stop that share and I'm going to go to my websites. I'm sorry, you're probably going to see my email for one hot second, but I will turn that off. Oops, nope, I did it wrong. See, we've been teaching all this time and I still did it wrong. Okay. There you go. So the websites, so this is my first one that I want to show you. So this is my race and crime one. This was my very first one I did. And if you can see down on the bottom here, you can have the students follow the page. So if I change anything or I modify it or I give them any updates on it, it like sends them a little email notification that something changed and that I had modified it. And so they really like that. And when you're creating it, when you make a modification, you have the ability to push out the notification. And if you choose not to, you don't have to notify them, but if you choose to, it'll notify them right away through their email. And they can look at it. I surveyed my students and every single one of them in all 4 of my classes use their phones to view it. Like the very first time they used it, none of them actually looked on their computers for the very first time, which is actually super surprising to me because I thought they would get it on the computer. But this would be my race and crime one. I'm actually working on for next quarter videos of myself, which I'm going to show you in a minute, instead of my little blob, boring blurb that they still have to read. I'm going to have a video that's going to welcome them to who I am. And as you can see, you can go down and you can still give all the sort of main things you want to hit on your syllabus, which I should say I do include a real syllabus on Moodle, and so that doesn't go away. But this is the one that I found they engage in. I also have like a little learning pact of what they can expect of me. And then of course, what I expect of them as well, especially because we are virtual now. And so there's a little bit more that I need to talk with them about. You can embed the links to your school policies if you want to talk about academic integrity. And then what I think is what more exciting is you get to pick out and show them the books, and you can create little images. You can even have a little like book review on there if you want them to click to the book reviews. Like if you're, so what I'll show you right here is I have them pick between one of these 3 books. And next quarter, I'll embed the book reviews so that if they want to click the link to see, well, what are people saying about these books and why might I pick this book over that book, they can do that. And then if you scroll down, I have 2 videos, and these videos are designed to kind of show them the sort of lens and framework that I'm coming at them with in terms of how I'm going to teach this course. I take a very critical view of race relations and within the criminal justice system. And so I'm kind of giving them this, like, this is what I'm going to be showing you and how I'm going to be teaching. So be ready. And if this doesn't seem like something that's exciting to you, you might not like the class. And then I have this video here, and they can just embed it. And once they push play, it can get bigger. It can be full screen. It can go straight to YouTube if you want it to. And then of course you have the chance to play with quotes. So this was my first stab at it. My other one that I'm going to show you is my 231 course, which is criminology. And it got a little bit better in terms of visuals. I put a little bit more about why this course, because I have a lot of first-year students in this class. It's a lower division, so the other's an upper division. So I pretty much know that a lot of people have taken me before, and so they kind of know. This one, they don't, and they're usually new to the university. And so I give them a little bit about the course, again, that blurb about me. But what I also embedded and SOU had created was I'll show you just quickly, like if they click here, they can see our little video of why I study criminal justice at SOU. So we have, you can't see it, but basically it's all of the faculty at SOU talking about our program, trying to grab my majors and minors and trying to kind of share them, like, this is what you can expect from our program. So I was able to like grab in the undergrads that aren't sure yet there and talk again about my course texts, which I told you I will embed links next time. A little bit more on learning packs because they're first year students. So I give a little bit more, directions on Moodle, and then I give them more resource access because again, first year students. Looking at my time. So the last one I want to show you is one that I was inspired by and I want to end up modeling. She used Google, and I will say from everyone I've seen online, Google does the coolest stuff. So I'm going to switch to Google next quarter. But as you can see, every single course she teaches is embedded within this one page, and you can just click which course you're interested in reading more about. And then the contact matter, and then she has a welcome video as to like why take this class. Hers is a little bit more brief than the ones that I like, or the ones that I create. But again, it gives this idea of like, this is the kind of class we're going to be. This is the things I teach. This is how I'm coming at you. And so, given my experience so far with these, I can track the views of how many times my students view them. And in the first week, their assignment was only, we had a week 0, so not really having class this quarter. Their only assignment was to go and view my liquid syllabus and the course documents. So like what's going to be coming up this quarter. And so I was able to track how many students actually viewed it, how many times, and how long that they viewed it for. So that was kind of cool. So I could see that every single student engaged, or not all students engaged. And so then I push it. And then you can also track through the quarter. So like, well, midterms come and I notice more people are clicking at it, or when I make them pick out their books. So that's kind of, so that's kind of the route that I took with these. But I think that before I leave, I just want you to realize how beneficial they are, not only to us as individual faculty, but to departments and to the administration in terms of recruitment. And Jennifer, I think did I hit the mark? I was watching.
You hit the mark perfectly. Thank
Yay. You. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go off camera now. Thank you.
That was excellent.
Bye.
Oh yeah, you can stop sharing your screen too. So. Okay, so thank you, Shanell. Next up we have Kristine, Artello, and Nia Rodgers from Virginia Commonwealth University. Thank you for staying up late and joining us to talk about reusable learning objectives in online courses in podcast form. And I love a good podcast, so I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm Kristine Artello, and I'm an associate professor at the Wilder School. And this presentation is a collaboration between myself and the Wilder School librarian, Nia Rodgers.
Hello, everyone. Oh, sorry, I was on the wrong screen. So we're here to talk about learning objects, and actually it's great that we're following Dr. Sanchez, because that's a perfect example of a learning object, right? A liquid syllabus. Other examples that you're already doing, quizzes, tests, the lectures that you make for class, you're already doing all of that stuff. What we're here to talk about is maybe adding a new dimension, which is an audio learning object. Some of the big research takeaways on this, as Dr. Sanchez pointed out, students learn differently. And so it's really important that you try to reach them in different ways. And so one of the things that we tried to do was to engage their audio learning as well as their visual learning. They're very much about audio stimulation. I don't know if you've noticed, but students wear headphones a lot. So what we're trying to do is reach them where they are, right? We're trying to get them to feel more positively about the material. What we also know is that they respond well to these kinds of additional objects. They feel like they've learned more about the material after they've used the objects.
So when you're trying to decide what's going to go into a learning object, how am I going to be doing this? What you need to think about is how is it going to fit in? Because these might be supplements to your lectures that you're doing, maybe a different way to be engaging with your students on this so that they have an alternative versus just reading the materials or listening to a lecture. We have set this up where you're looking for ways in which to find a deeper context, because we all know CJ is a lot about the context, to provide them with this opportunity as well as engaging with the instructor. We have set this up as a didactic between Nia and myself, where we're talking to one another, so that in many ways Nia's asking the questions a student would ask if we were in the classroom on the subject. And the other thing is you want to make them short. You want to make them pointed. You should have one goal for each one of the learning objects when you're doing those. So part of the creative process, I already started, was having one goal for the object. For example, we did breaking into the iPhone. That one was particular to set what are the two arguments into whether to break into the iPhone or not. What are those arguments? Another one was Olmsted, to set out, again, what are the arguments regarding tapping a person's phone at this point back in the early 1900s. So talking about that. And also when you're doing this and deciding how to be presenting it, make sure you have a hook, which is one of the things we did. And you also want to create a script. The script is useful because it's something that you can go back to and make sure, did I cover all my points? Am I getting it across? Have I put too much of where one person is talking too much? Because that's something that within the didactic, you want to make sure that you're going quick with this. This happens to be the Olmsted. And then you can put this up with your learning object. So then students have both the audio as well as the script so that it's easy for them to be able to access that.
So a little time on the technical process, because this is probably part of what people really aren't as familiar with. We started off in a studio. Remember those days when we could sit in the same room together? We started off in a studio. We had really nice headphones. We had Audition, which is a pay-for product. right? And then we realized we didn't have to go that far for most of our episodes. For most of our episodes, we realized what we could do was simple headsets, using Zoom or using some other free product like Audacity or GarageBand to record, and then to edit. And we chose to do very light editing. You can edit these within an inch of their existence, but remember that's a time commitment. So you may not want to spend the time doing that. That's where the script can be really helpful. If you really follow the script, you don't have to do much in the way of editing. The other thing that you might consider is that if you are going to have a formal transcript made, meaning you are not going to write a script, you're just going to record it and then have a formal transcript made, that costs money. So you would want to make sure that you have either support from your institution or deep pockets. I don't know you, I'm not going to judge. We chose to use Zoom because it will actually make a pretty decent audio transcript for you on the very few that we didn't have a script for. But for the most part, Dr. Artello scripted us right down to pauses because it was just easier in the long run at having a transcript available. Then finally, you want to make sure you either put that in Blackboard or Canvas or on an institutional repository. You want to put it where they can get it, right? You can join something like iTunes, or you can use something like Transistor, which puts out a podcast to all of the services at one time. You can choose to do that. Transistor costs about $200 a year. There are some products that are more expensive, some products that are less. So the distribution can be expensive, or it can be free if you put it into Blackboard or Canvas or whichever. Then there's your distribution, right? But we want you to keep in mind something we found out about distribution by doing it. So we put it into our institutional repository because we were trying to be good citizens, right? That's what we should do. We should put them into our institutional repositories. The problem with that was 7 downloads off of one episode. And we chose to compare, by the way, one learning object, which was how to break into an iPhone. Over 2 semesters, as you can see here, 7 downloads. Whereas when it was embedded into Blackboard, it was downloaded by 103 students in 2 semesters for a total of 2,271 times. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean they went back and listened to it multiple times? Probably. There may have been some students we know are English is their second language. And so they're going back and listening multiple times because they're trying to pick that up. Sometimes it's because the cases are complicated. Sometimes it's because they get interrupted. But just keep in mind that that's the difference between those two, between the repository and the Blackboard. And by the way, of our repository downloads, one of them for each one of the learning objects was downloaded by a person at a Honda dealership. So maybe they're just self-educating, which is awesome.
So we wanted to make sure that we shared what we've learned in doing this little experiment. It is very important to have a hook in the title to make sure, because I noticed as we went on this semester, I got a little lazy with the titles, and then they didn't download them as much. So for example, the Carpenter v. US case, well, they wouldn't know what that means if I don't put in there, can the government track you with your cell phone? You know, that would have been a much better hook for it had I done that. And so the differences in the students downloading it went down as the semester went on. So that's one of the things. Make sure you have a hook. Make sure that you are getting the data on each semester if you're taking it from Blackboard or Moodle. I didn't do it the first semester we did it, which was the spring, which, surprise, it was COVID, so I ended up not pulling that down. But I couldn't go back and get it. So we only have summer and fall so far to do that. And also make sure that they are easily accessible in your learning page, and they go with that so that students have exposure to it. It's easy, one click. That is what's crucial there with that one. So what we've learned, keep it short, keep it fun, keep it simple, one subject at a time to really get the points across, and accessible. And also think about how you're going to track this. How are you going to make sure that what you are doing is working? That's really important for you to be able to adapt and learn and improve these as you are going with this. And also asking the students what they really are getting from it also is helpful. And I'm still waiting to get that in from a little survey I sent out to them.
These are our references. Because I'm a librarian, I can't state anything outright. I have to reference every single cite your source, cite your source. So these are the sources I'm citing, and they will be, I assume, up with these slides when they become available. The one point that I would choose to reiterate as my ending statement is partnership is everything in these particular instances. I think they're more interesting because they are overhearing a conversation that sounds very similar to the conversation that you would have in class with your professor or in their office hours with your professor. Can you explain this a little bit more? Why doesn't this part make sense? That sort of thing. That's what we chose to do with the learning object because we wanted them to recognize that it's okay to ask questions. You should be asking questions, and there are no dumb questions, right? That's what we always say in the library. There's no such thing as a dumb question. So we wanted to encourage that behavior, and part of that is just the partnership, and part of that is Dr. Artello's scripts, and I'm sure she would be happy to share those with anybody who would like to borrow them, use them, or at least grab an example and use that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and if you have any questions on doing this, again, I'm very lucky that I have Nia as a partner in this endeavor with me, has really made this so enjoyable. The one thing I forgot to mention, it usually takes me anywhere from a half hour to 45 minutes to be writing a script. To sit down to make sure that I have it, and then probably at least another 15 minutes going back through it. So there is some time, but I think it's worth it. The students seem to be enjoying it, and it's something that I can use over and over again, which is always helpful. In this time, I want to thank you for your time and attention tonight.
Thank you, Nia, and thank you, Kristine. That was wonderful. That's fascinating. I have questions for you, but we're going to do that at the end. So thank you very much. Up next, we have Jennifer Moreno from Western Oregon University. She's going to be talking about what's your tech language.
Hello. So I'm super excited to go after Shanell and Kristine and Nia, only because I feel like we actually were on the same wavelength when we did our presentation. So much of what I'm saying is so in line with already what's been said. So I'm a little bit excited. All right, so let me share my screen here. Great, so I'm gonna be talking about tech language. Again, I'm Jenny Moreno. I'm assistant professor in the Criminal Justice Science Division at Western Oregon University. I'm one of the resident techies, and it's not because I'm particularly savvy when it comes to technology. It's really just because I have, I guess, sort of grudgingly accepted the fact that higher education isn't just about subject matter expertise anymore. We have to be not only subject matter experts, but we have to have this awareness of technology and the ability to create these learning environments online. So I've been doing some tech language immersion in the past year or so, doing LMS proficiency, universal design, OER type stuff. And honestly, it's like a rabbit hole. Once you get in there and you realize you're learning more, you realize how much you actually don't know when it comes to technology. So for me, it's basically floundering around trying to find my technological prowess while realizing simultaneously that I have none. So we're going to talk about technology language today and how you can use that in your class. And what's been alluded to so far, of course, there's so many ways that we can teach. And this isn't about teaching a class. This isn't about learning styles. My presentation's not about how adult learners learn, visual, cognitive, none of that stuff. Oops. What this presentation is really about is about communicating how you have already decided that you want to teach. You have created your course in a specific way. You have designed your assessments and activities so that you can teach the way that you want to teach. The problem is sometimes that's being lost in translation. You have to transition to this artificial world. And when you do that, what you're intending to get across isn't actually coming across like you want it to. And so what does that create is just this massive amount of frustration, like a terrible relationship. You are frustrated, irritated, overwhelmed. The students aren't responding the way that you want them to. Students are, excuse me, confused. They feel alone, they're disengaged. And basically, it's just this really terrible relationship. So in that vein, it reminds me a lot of Dr. Gary Chapman's 5 Love Languages. If you've ever read this book, it's all about how we communicate and experience love. And it's not that the message isn't there, love. It's just that as people, we give love using certain languages and we receive love in certain languages. So an example would be perhaps a partner that does acts of service all the time, does laundry, makes coffee, is really a caretaker. The other partner doesn't feel loved because they need to hear words. They are more words of affirmation type people. That's how they experience love. That's how they show love. And it's not that the love doesn't exist. It's just the communication styles are different. And I think when we're teaching online, what you will find is that it's a lot of the same concepts. So I'm going to kind of stick with these 5 love languages. The message that we're trying to get across to students is this message of learning. We want students to learn. We want to teach. We want them to respond in certain ways. And yet we're seeing this huge, chasm between what we want and what we're seeing. And I think a reason for this is that we are not using our tech language efficiently. So let's start with the first one, which is words of affirmation. And in tech language, words of affirmation are verbal or written feedback that express your support or encouragement to students. Now, traditionally, and in a classroom, this is easy. We provide assessment feedback, we write on papers, we do grading. While we're in class, we can offer verbal praise and affirmation. That was a great point. That's really awesome observation. We can give those words of affirmation directly. Online, we can do that, and we do that by giving comments, feedback. We try and do that timely, frequently, specifically. But I think what you will see as the default method for giving these words of affirmation is just the typing of commentary back. You're grading a paper, you put in a few comments, grade the paper, move on to the next thing. There are way more ways that we can give those words of information by using the technology that's available to us. We can do auto-scheduled messages. We can embed messages in our courses. We can use video, audio, written. And again, we are speaking to learning styles and a lot of the pedagogy type things that we use when we teach. But really, if you think about it, it's about being able to communicate those words of affirmation in a way that's meaningful for students. And just as you communicate those, it's also nice to receive that back. So here's some tips in doing words of affirmation for your course. Really get to know your LMS tools. And as we've heard already, we've got people in Blackboard, we've got people in Moodle, we've got people in Canvas. So I can't speak to a particular LMS, but look and really pay attention to what's already built in. There's no need to go out and find a whole bunch of fancy apps to do all these different types of words of affirmation feedback if it's already built in. So for Canvas, for example, there's an option for you to do a recording or a video feedback right there in your instant grader. This is one of my favorite things to do. I like to record my feedback generally. So if I ask students to do a statute diagram, I'll do the diagram doing a screen share, and I'll record myself identifying the different parts and elements, and I include that in the feedback. So they get specific feedback and they get just overall feedback about what it was that I was looking for in that particular assignment. So they get some of the reading and an actual video feedback. And you can use screencast, you can use Zoom, and again, use those audio feedbacks. And I gave some examples here, but I really want to emphasize, you don't have to increase the amount of apps that you use to be technologically savvy. Just find the ones that work for you and try and figure out ways to give those words of affirmation to students. So the next tech language is acts of service. So any act or accommodation that eases the burden of online fatigue and technology issues. This is a big one, and it's a big one because we are all just so burnt out on the technology. Everything online, from the Zooms and the synchronous, asynchronous, the online word processing documents, it's just, we crave this human interaction, and yet we're stuck again in this artificial type environment. So what I like to do for students is do whatever I can to accommodate and make these tech issues better. This is an example of a tech policy that I used in one of my syllabus, and I was thinking that this would be great in a liquid syllabus to have a little tech section down there. And I actually went through and did all the work for my students in finding out about all of the requirements that we need to run Canvas and where they can find help. This is a burden that I took on for them as an act of service. They sometimes just don't know where to go to get help or to get resources, so I went ahead and did that. Make sure that you're consistent in your course design. Give them the gift, give them the act of service of actually setting up your course in a way that they can understand and that's predictable. So here are just some examples of how you could set up your course. And again, there's no right or wrong answer here. Just make sure that part of the service that you're doing for them is providing consistency and the ability to understand, communicate your course material to them in a meaningful way. Check functionality and accessibility regularly. Links change. If you're using videos, if you're using books, people are constantly updating materials. It's super frustrating for students when they go to access material and it just doesn't work anymore. So do that active service and check all those things ahead of time. And then I also heard provide alternative course and material access, which is great. Students sometimes just can't access things online, and it's really nice when they can see them in a different format. I suggest that you do an analog version of your course. And actually this year in Canvas, we had Canvas boot a bunch of students out of my class. And several students were emailing me, I don't have access to Canvas anymore. How do I do the class? I didn't have an offline version of my course. I put everything online and didn't take the time to actually create a way for them to see the material. So I had to go through for several weeks and find ways to take links and create documents and little portfolios so that they could go through and do class materials. So just think about that when you're creating your courses, that a service you can do for your students is to anticipate these problems that they might have. And bandwidth, that's something that's super important. It's really nice and great if you can stream videos and have really interactive, engaging course. It's really crappy for the student that doesn't have great internet access or can't access your videos because it's running stream and data that they do or that they might not have. So just be aware of bandwidth issues. The next tech language is quality time, and I think this is one of the harder ones to accomplish in the online sphere. Traditionally, we do this with office hours, raised hands, or popcorn meetings. That's what I call when a student pops in at the beginning or end of the class just to say a few things to you. Giving quality time online is really difficult. Create some virtual office hours. I love virtual drop-ins. I'll say I'm available on Mondays from 8 to 10. Just pop in if you want. I'll just be sitting with the Zoom screen. You can come in, no appointment necessary. Students really like that because it's low-key, no pressure, no appointments. They don't have to have anything ready. They can just pop in and have a cup of coffee with me if they want. Receiving quality time from students is actually something that they want to. They want to give you some quality time as well, and to provide a place for them to connect with you, whether that's through chat or again, a drop-in meeting, some other app is really useful. And these are, again, just examples of external tools that you could use. I have a coworker that uses Slack, which is like a messaging system where she can basically like text message her students anytime and they can text message her. These are some similar apps to that. Use what's in your LMS, so chat, messaging, use your analytics to see how students are engaging, whether they prefer a video versus a chat versus a discussion forum, things like that. Giving, this is the next tech language. Symbols that reflect effort and acknowledge progress and growth. I love this one because I think in higher ed, we don't use this enough. Students love to be incentivized. They want to be able to get course, awards, course badges. So use what's available in your LMS. For Canvas, they use Badger, and you can actually set up this gamification of your course where when they complete a module, they get a sticker or a badge. And funnily enough, they actually love collecting the badges. It's sort of, by the end of the course, they have this neat little collection that shows all the really cool things they did. And class treats, remember in middle school, we used to get pizza parties or something if we did really well. I actually created a rap video for my students one term. They all did really well on an assignment. And so I recorded myself doing a TikTok type rap video. And that was sort of their incentive for doing well. You can do silly things like that. These are some examples of how you would integrate that into your online courses. Again, setting up those requirements and prerequisites, enabling likes. Canvas has a way where you can like material. Use Badger, Credily, these things where you can attach some sort of badge to assignments. Encourage social responses. I really loved what Shanell said about students being really familiar with social networking. Allow them the opportunity to not have to delve in and really give in-depth responses. A like, a thumbs up, an emoji. Sometimes that's enough just to make them feel seen, to give them an opportunity to do something. And finally, physical presence. This one I think is, again, very difficult to accomplish in the sense of online teaching. Traditionally, we show up to lectures, we're dressed the way that we're dressed, we have our own personalities, and we can express that in class. It's hard to replicate that. And again, I speak to the liquid syllabus and even the learning object, where you have an opportunity to be seen, to have your voice heard, to hear your personality come through. Spend some time. Create some physical presence online by developing your course in the style that you are, with the videos, with the pictures, with design. It really is your world to create, so try and inject yourself into that. You can do this through recording tools. Use design templates if you are not a course designer or particularly great at coding, which I'm not. Use apps like Zoom, WebEx, YouTube. Do a Bitmoji or an avatar to represent yourself. And also encourage students to do the same. There's one thing that I love to see of students is when I get to see their faces on their actual Canvas profile. I hate when I just see like the little face avatar. I want to see them too. So encourage them to actually create some physical presence in their own accounts as well. So again, this is just a summary of the 5 love languages and just some takeaways. This being high tech and speaking tech language is not about just a course full of technology. Technology is inevitable. Competency is absolutely necessary. Mastering your technology is about effective teaching and pedagogy for you. And it's personal and it's unique. So find the things that work for you and try and develop those love languages into your courses.
Thank you, Jenny. That was wonderful. All right. Mercedes Valadez, my colleague at California State University, Sacramento, is up next. She's going to be talking about applying strategies to increase student success in online courses.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Hopefully everyone can see that. So as Jennifer said, I'm going to be presenting on applying strategies to increase student success in online courses. So to begin, all of us here were probably thrust into the online world around March when most campuses started closing up. Some faculty had varying comfort levels when it came to teaching online. I had taught online for a number of years, so I was pretty comfortable doing so. But students have also some questions and issues with online learning. And so when I did my midterm evaluation, I found out that about 50-50 in terms of the percentage of students were comfortable with online learning, and some have never taken an online class. So one of the things that I did, like some of the individuals who presented earlier, I took some teaching workshops through my university. I did the summer Teach Online program, and I'm currently going through the AQ 6 certificate program. I did their, I think, 12 certificates a couple years ago. So this presentation is focused on kind of the tools and strategies that I learned through those 2 trainings. And some of it may feel like review because some of the other presenters already touched upon it. So to begin, I've noticed that with some students, they do have some preferred learning styles. They may not be learning styles that, in the sense that that's the only way that they learn, but they certainly prefer certain things. So for example, I noticed that some students really respond positively when I have breaks in my lectures with mini video clips. And these are just like a 2 or 3 minute clip just to kind of break down the lecture and get them on something new and fresh. And another strategy that I found that some students really respond to is the idea of setting up virtual study groups for them. And I create kind of a discussion board group where people can join and have study sessions together or just discuss a concept or topic. And I encourage them to have discussions in terms of how they would teach someone a concept or a topic, because sometimes that'll help them in terms of listening to themselves talk it through. One of the other strategies that I find that's really helpful is teaching students how to do flashcards or teaching students how to create a study guide. I think most people think that it's really easy and intuitive, just like taking good notes. But what I learned through the training is that not all students know how to create these tools for themselves. So what I like to do is provide a skeletal outline for them to use as a study guide. And I've had students respond that it's one of their favorite things to use in the class. When they're reading the chapter or reviewing the lecture, they will often fill it out, and it'll help them when it comes time to take the exam. In terms of the course structure, I use Canvas, but these tips apply to any other program that you use, so Blackboard or Canvas or whatever else. But one of the things that I learned was to create a module roadmap. And here you will want to include the week, the dates, and the topic that you're going to cover. It should also provide a brief overview. I like to have a to-do list. So the module will start off with what they are expected to do that week, and I include the deadlines. I think it's also important to create this to-do list in a sequence in terms of the order that you want them to complete the tasks, because some students will start off doing the discussion before they do the reading, or listening to the lecture before they do anything else. So you just want to be really clear about what they should do and in what sequence and what you recommend. Because students are going through a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of instability, I think it's important to provide predictability in your course, and this helps when all of your modules are created the same way and they follow a certain rhythm or pattern. This is something that students have commented on in my midterm evaluations, that it's really helped them, that it gives them a sense of stability. And so it may not seem like it's a big deal, but it does provide them with that sense of relief. And it also helps reduce their stress when they know what's coming up and they know what to expect. So one of the other things that I think is really helpful is figuring out how you want to close your module. So you can either summarize your module by providing the main ideas of the week and connecting those to your course learning outcomes, or you can include a practice quiz. Students requested that I create a weekly practice quiz for them, so I started doing that. And this is one way that they can assess their learning or figure out where they still need to focus additional time on, and you can actually go through and look at how many questions they missed. The fact that it's not graded is also a relief for them because they can take it as many times as they want, or and not feel that intense pressure that comes with taking an exam. You can also include a discussion board to close out your module, and people can include one takeaway from the module or something that they struggled with, or a challenge that they faced and how they were able to address that, whether it was by doing an additional reading, watching a particular video clip, or talking about that during your Zoom office hours. So all these three things can be pretty helpful in terms of how you want to consider closing your weekly modules. One area where I wasn't really comfortable with before the pandemic was recording myself. So, but I had to learn to do that. And I have kind of worked on my micro lecture skills. So in the AQ training, you learn about how to create these micro lectures. And with these, they're about maybe 6 to 10 minutes or so. But here you outline, a very clear learning objective. One thing that helps is to write a script, and that'll help you stay on track so that you don't go off script and ramble about something else. You also need to consider your presentation style. I think one of the panelists mentioned, presenting yourself in a human way, and so you don't need to be perfect when you're going through your presentation. Some people stumble through their words, and that happens whether you're recording something or doing a live lecture. So don't worry about perfection. And it's important to consider your pace. I think in my first couple years of teaching, I was told that I speak too quickly or talk too fast. So just keep in mind the pace. And one of the things that I learned was doing captions or being able to use the transcript function for Zoom recordings. And so that was really helpful if you consider that there may be students who need that accommodation. In terms of quality, try to do your lecture somewhere where there isn't a lot of background noise, somewhere that's not very distracting. And I say that as you can probably hear my child in the background, so I apologize for that. But I wanted to include a course map as an example. And one of our presenters showed a couple other examples which were also very helpful, but this is just one that was provided to us through the Teach Online training. You can see here, it's your module, your title, you include the learning outcomes, You include what material you want them to review for that week, the activities you want them to complete, and the assessment or assignment that is due, including the due date. So I found that creating this course map for each week has been really helpful, again, for predictability and just so that students know what's coming up next. All of these things do take additional time, but I think that they're really worth it because it gives students a sense of relief, and it's also really helpful to keep yourself organized. I know that we're also balancing a lot of courses and a lot of other things, so I think it's been helpful on both parts. So thank you, and I believe I finished right on time.
You did finish right on time. My buzzer was just about to go off. Thank you very much, Mercedes. We do have some questions from our attendees. So I'm going to go through those now. So let's start with Shanell. We have a comment and a question. Thank you for the interesting insights. Sorry if I missed this, but what platform have you used? You said you would move to Google in the future. Could you tell us more about how to get started on the liquid syllabus?
Yes, sorry. So it's called, I think it's Poplar is how you say it. It's P-O-P-U-L-R. So it looks like popular without the A. And it's super easy. They have templates. And so if you just go in there and start playing with the templates, you can kind of pick the one you like. But like I said, I'm going to switch to Google. So I don't know. And I heard a lot of you mentioning Canvas. If you have Canvas, you're already like at a head start because it's like Poplar on steroids. You can do a lot more. I watched the video on YouTube. So if I were any of you with Canvas, I would just switch right to Canvas. But yeah, they're really easy. And I'm telling you, I'm probably the least tech savvy 30 or 35-year-old I know in history, and I can do this. So yeah.
All right, thank you. So see, we also have a question for Jenny. Do you share with your students what you're doing using the love languages?
Yes and no. So I don't outwardly say, you know, here's how I'm trying to communicate with you. But if you notice that a student has taken the time to, you know, really jazz up their own profile, or if I ask students to do that and I have some that are reluctant to do it, I'll explain, you know, it's use whatever you want to represent you. It doesn't have to be a picture. It can be an avatar. I just want to learn a little bit more about you. So, you know, I'll kind of explain what I'm getting at and kind of allude to the love languages, but I've never actually just said, you know, I'm using tech languages on you and here's how it's going. It's more just about observation and sort of looking at students and trying to explain, you know, what I'm getting at or what I'm trying to get from them in like a less formal way. I don't really just go out and say it, although you could.
There's some learning right there. Also, another question for you, Jenny, since we have you up on the screen. What is your most frequent COVID era complaint from students?
So I get 2 complaints consistently, and I'll say that I get the complaints because I've asked for the complaints, which you'll notice from my presentation, I try and ask students and give them the opportunity to communicate with me. So the 2 complaints that I get, or feedback, is one, they notice a lack of knowledge about technology among their classes, that they can really pick out which professors are comfortable with technology and which just slap up some information, can barely put a link together to, you know, to some things. And that's super frustrating because they see classes at their best and also classes at their worst. And then the second complaint is course design, 100%, that they are confused, courses are convoluted, they don't make sense, if there's too many clicks to get to information. So they really like that organization, something predictable, something that they can come back that's really easy to use.
All right, thank you. So we also have a question for Kristine and Nia about the podcasts. The question is, first of all, it says, great advice on the titles and hooks. What is your advice on the ideal length?
10 to 12 minutes is perfect. I have a couple that are 15, but those are very interesting ones, I think. But yeah, we try to shoot for 10 to 12.
And are these like fictional dialogues between like a student and a professor, or how do you frame them?
They're actually dialogues between the two of us. My subject area is actually Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness. So almost always Dr. Artello says, here's a thing. And I say, that doesn't make any sense. And then it evolves into a conversation. There's a lot of me going, really? Miranda just said, yeah, I did it. Like, what the heck, you know? And so, but I suspect that I'm coming at it from the same level as sort of the sophomore junior who doesn't really know as much about criminal justice. That's kind of the gear level. They're not geared at the master's level. They're geared at the undergraduate level.
Well, it sounds like I teach the same class as you, Kristine, because I teach carpenter as well. So,
Yes.
so I would love to see your script, and I would absolutely love to get more information on this. And I think Taryn and I were both hoping that everybody would share your PowerPoints with us so that we could share those with the attendees as well, if everybody is willing to do that.
Definitely. And you can also look at our podcast through the VCU Scholar Compass, and we'll put the link on the PowerPoint that the slide PowerPoint that we send you all.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I think
so. Then you can go in and actually see them, and the scripts are there as well.
As soon as I really was interested in this, but as soon as you said it was evergreen and you could use it every semester, then I was like, well, that's going on the to-do list.
Yeah, it is. And I also think that what's great about this is that we're able to show our personalities.
Right. Yeah.
In doing this, and Nia is great that she's willing to go out there and say, what are you talking about? That can't be right.
That is, by the way, for panelists who are thinking about doing this with a partner. So some people are going to be unwilling because they're not going to be willing to not know something publicly. The thing about being a librarian is that I know I don't know. Like, I don't have to know, I only have to know where to find it. And so so you might, if you're looking for a partner and you're struggling to find one in your department, you might consider asking your librarian, because most of those people are already doing things like this, and they'll probably be game for any kind of outreach with your students.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. Okay, so I have another question for Jenny. You mentioned embedding video in Canvas in the speed grading. So instead of like marking the grading, you are actually speaking the grading?
Yeah, so there's a little button. Yes, so in the speed grader, down where you would normally write comments, there's actually a little option for you to hit a recorder, an audio recorder or a video recorder. So you could open up a screen of yourself while you're reading the paper and sort of annotate your feedback verbally, either through the video or audio, and it automatically places it into the grading format for Canvas, into the speed grader. So then you don't actually ever have to write anything. The only downfall I see about that, which I don't love, is sometimes I want them to see what I'm pointing at. So I tend to use Screencast-O-Matic and do a screen share of me grading their paper, because then they see me and they see my cursor moving around their paper. And again, I'm no tech expert, but that's just what works for me. There might be a better app or something out there that works better for others, but that's just, I like that ability to do video or audio instead of typing all the time.
That's why that's a great question. And I have a question for Mercedes. You talked about the practice quizzes and that they're ungraded. Do all students participate, or is this optional? And if it's optional, what percentage of students would you say take the practice quiz?
So I noticed with the first practice quiz, not many students took it because there wasn't a big incentive besides this will help you see where you need to do a little bit more work. But once they took the first exam and they didn't do as great as they were expecting, I noticed a huge spike when it came to the next practice quizzes. So I would say now it's maybe like 80% of students who are completing them on a weekly basis. And that was one of the requests that I had when I did my midterm evaluation. So I think a lot of students have been taking advantage of them and are doing really well with them. I haven't had any complaints about them, but I do notice that some students haven't been taking them. So what I'll do is I will remind them or encourage them to do it. But yeah, did I answer the question?
I think so. And then I had a follow-up on that. When you talked about your study groups, do you organize study groups? Do you just encourage your students to create their own study groups? Is it voluntary or is it something that you assign?
No, this semester it's voluntary because I just learned about that in my training. So I didn't have enough time to really prepare for that. I think because everyone's schedules are so different from what they were expecting when they signed up for courses. I don't really feel comfortable assigning them to particular groups or to commit to particular times to have conversations with people. So this semester I encouraged it and I created a space for it for those that really wanted it. But I want to put a little bit more thought into how I can encourage others to do it, but because I noticed that not many are taking advantage of it. It was also a way to try to create community, and that's really hard to do with teaching online. So I'm still figuring out some strategies to put that together. And like I said, I'm still going through the AQ 6 weeks, so our 6 certificate program. So I'm hoping to get additional tools and strategies to kind of work that one out before the next semester.
Thank you. And then one last question for Shanell, and I think then sorry, I had another question as well. Where can you get additional trainings to improve teaching online besides the AQ? So I guess that's open to anybody who has suggestions on additional training.
At my university, we have the Center for Teaching and Learning, and you might want to start there to see if your university has one. That's been really helpful. They provide free resources, workshops, and trainings. One of the other things that I did was I attended a teaching conference, and that was really helpful. And I did that over the summer to, again, try to pick up on tips and strategies to think about what I would do in the fall. And so there are a lot of teaching workshops and trainings through teaching specific conferences. I'm going to be attending one in March that focuses on team-based learning. So that one should be pretty helpful in trying to figure out what I just mentioned earlier, how to create this sense of teamwork and community. So those are just a couple recommendations.
Do any of the other panelists have any recommendations for trainings?
We have a Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, but here's the thing, lots of universities do, and so you can always steal from another university. So start looking at some of the other ones that have really big online programs and see what they offer and have, because that's when I started teaching, because I've been teaching online now since 2014. So I've gone to, like, Arizona State University has huge online, so does Penn State, you know, so I go and I steal from everyone that I can and see what's out there.
Also, as a side note, the other group of people who do what y'all do are librarians. So ACRL, ALA, right, they all have both conference proceedings and lots of online courses that help with, we do one-offs generally, but what we do one time, y'all could do 100. So it's worth taking a look at the other profession that does a great deal of teaching in this way.
And there's also some comments in the chat too. There are some suggestions that have popped up. So
the only other thing I'd say is be careful about putting too much in. You know, start off small. You know, do, you know, 1 or 2 things and see how they work out. And then start adding slowly to them. Like I said, I have been doing this since 2014, and that's when, you know, adding the this podcast format. I call it a podcast. It's a learning object because we don't broadcast it everywhere. It was something that came about after I'd been getting all my other basic stuff together. You know, so sometimes if you're starting off with the basic, get the basics down, and then you can start building the other stuff. Don't overwhelm yourself, because this is already overwhelming.
That's very good advice. Okay. And Shanell, there was one last question for you, and it was my question. So that's why I went ahead and put it last. But I was wondering how much time you invest in creating the liquid syllabus.
Yeah, that's a good one. So the first one I did, it was actually my longest, obviously. So it took me about 3 hours to play with it. And it's mostly just because I couldn't figure out what background I wanted, and like I was having fun. And then everyone after that was really quick. And if you have, like I have 2 crim classes this quarter, one's online and one's virtual, and I can duplicate them. And then you can just modify really easily. So you can hit duplicate course, it creates a new little link, but then you can just modify for the online. But I think, I'll be honest, it was only time consuming because I was having fun figuring it out. So.
Thank you very much. All right, well, thank you very much to all of our panelists. That's wonderful, great advice, and really appreciate your time and your effort. And for those of you on the East Coast for staying up so late, bless you. All right, let's get started on our second panel. Might take us just a second to switch our panelists to attendees, from attendees to panelists. So give us just 1 second. Okay. All right, did we get, I think we have everyone. Welcome. All right, so we're going to move to our second panel. We're going to start with Janese Free and Jeffrey Smith Jr. from Emmanuel College, talking about using the documentary 13th in criminal justice curriculum.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Janese Free, and I'm an associate professor of sociology and criminology and criminal justice at Emmanuel College in Boston, and my co-presenter is here with me also.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Smith. I'm the Associate Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion, Chief Diversity Officer, and Deputy Title IX Coordinator at Emmanuel College.
So we're looking forward to talking to you tonight about a series that we just did actually last month at Emmanuel. We had done it previously in person, but this time obviously it was via Zoom, and so we thought we'd share with you a little bit about our experience and a little bit about the students' experiences as well. So we used the documentary 13th, which I'm sure many people are familiar with, as our jumping off point. And we decided that it was just simply too large and long and packed with information to cover it all in one event. The purpose was to be sort of discussion-based and allow students to initiate questions, and Jeff and I to facilitate questions. And so we decided to break it up into a 3-part series. So you'll see on the screen here, this is the flyer that went out. There was one evening, about an hour long each evening. We had themes for each evening, and then we would show a short 15 to 20 minute video clip from the film to start off the evening, and then follow that up with discussion questions. So in thinking about what did we feel was most important in doing this, or what did we think really contributed to the experience, we decided that first and foremost is really collaboration. We've heard a lot about collaboration already this evening in the other workshops that were and presentations that were being shared, but this was really a mix of administration, which is Jeff, as well as our library through Diane is the woman's name who coordinated the library end of things for us, and then myself as a faculty member. And just establishing a sense of trust. Jeff and I had worked together a couple times previously, talking about hard issues in the classroom. I brought him in to speak when I was doing a week on race and the criminal justice system around shootings and police abuse of force. And so I think that's really important and helpful, is that you have someone that you know and that you trust to work with as well. We started off the evenings by just introducing ourselves. Some of the students knew Jeff, some knew me, some of them knew neither of us. And then Jeff and I would each share a little bit about our own sort of journey or background around race, around criminal justice, and why we felt these conversations were important. And we tried to set the stage for a safe, comfortable environment for the students as much as possible. We gave trigger warnings when needed in terms of violent content or upsetting content. And then we really tried to focus on, or to raise the point that we're all hopefully here to learn, and that we wanted students to ask questions, that this was a safe space, and that we would be respectful of each other's backgrounds and differences, but that this was really a place to come and ask questions and talk about it. Jeff, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Just want to reiterate, especially your point about collaboration. This was a project that, as Janese mentioned earlier, we'd done before in preparing for this virtual environment, also preparing to make this a 3-part event, knowing that we'd have students who'd be present maybe for the first conversation on the 6th and maybe wouldn't come back, or we'd have folks jumping in on the 13th and 20th. So we had to prepare for, we almost had to, even though it was a series of conversations in the same documentary, every week we almost had to start over, and, get people caught up, also, engage the people who'd been there before. So I really thought that we collaborated well. And, one point that I think Janese mentioned, some students know her, some students know me, and it was great that we were able to kind of give each other credibility. So her as a faculty member bringing me into the classroom, some students, and we're at a small school, but some of the students I'm not as connected to, I think that they saw that we had rapport and we'd work together. And then some of the folks who I work with on the administrative side, who maybe weren't criminal justice, sociology majors, they get to see Dr. Free and meet her and see how we work together. So I think the students really appreciated our professional relationship and our synergy.
I think that's a great point. And even our backgrounds, that, I tend to work with criminal justice students and majors. Jeff really works a lot on inclusivity and diversity and student groups related to that. And so I think that was also important, that they felt like they could sort of trust that we were both there for similar reasons, even though we sort of represented these two really different, in some ways, seemingly different perspectives. So we prepared some discussion questions ahead of time, which we'll show you in just a second. And then we also allowed students just to initiate spontaneous, and we encourage spontaneous questions and conversation. Each evening, our school is about 12 or 1,400 students. And each evening, we had about 15 to 25 students per session, which for Zoom is actually a good turnout. And students came for some of my classes and other classes for credit in the class, or they just came by choice. They just wanted to be there. Looking back at the attendance, it looked like it was about half and half from what we could tell. So
one other note,
yeah.
Sorry, geez, just, we were intentional about that 7:30 time. We wanted students to have a little break from their class. 11:30 to get through, since it's blank started, and I think maybe going later would have hurt us. So it really did feel like that was a great time slot for this particular
I agree,
program.
and I think we both, you and I, Jeff, mentioned that going later into the night, I think would have been really hard. Jeff and I both said evening, discuss all these goals beforehand, but these were spoken or unspoken. And now looking back, we feel like this is some of what it accomplished, what we were hoping to do. So it encouraged respectful discussions on challenging and complex topics. And one of the pieces that I personally have loved about this the most is that I think it really, actually, I understood that from the start. It's no problem. And I think that's valuable for students to see that, whether they learn sort of how to communicate, or they see that these are hard for everybody, whether you're a professor or administrator, adult or student. Expose students to different experiences, as well as backgrounds and our own truths. Jeff talks a lot about, this is my perspective, this is my truth, and I want to share it with you. You may have a different one, but we need to hear each other's truths and experiences. Building community, preparing them for the real world, and then also just some of the content. I think it was a really great way for me as a criminal justice professor to be able to share content and to teach without being in a formal or that we would just mention, because I think they're valuable that we met on 3 different occasions because it
on these types of programs, it gives me that experience where I'm in a little bit more of a formal space. So I like that we kind of meet in the middle at this place where I'm not just the person who you see at events. And in my new role, so I was promoted this time last year, so I am working a lot more in institutional policy. But prior to this role, I was someone who was had a lot more student contact, helping students figure things out, addressing issues on campus and in the student life area. So I like that, this was less formal on your end, but it also was a little bit more formal on my end. So I love that this was a place where we can meet in the middle and, work outside of our normal space on campus.
Definitely.
So the discussion questions, we spent a good amount of time talking over Zoom and Teams, just trying to figure out what we wanted to pull out of each session. So we broke each session. So we broke the documentary up into chronological order. And then we concluded by discussing the long-term impact of mass incarceration, the criminalization of Black men. So we talked about more contemporary issues in that last piece.
And throughout all of this, we tried really hard to get the students to connect some of these historical events with current events. And we felt like that was a very positive aspect of what happened, is that they were able to make some of those connections as well. So we've shared just some reflection here the woman who's from the library said that they'd learned in the class to what they were seeing. We wanted to just end by mentioning that one of the nice follow-ups as a result of this was that Diane, the librarian, created what we call a research guide. It's located on our webpage for our school library, and the students can now go in. On the left, you'll see sort of the landing page where they can either watch the clip or they can scroll down, and then on the right, you'll see if they click onto resources, we've been able to then supply additional resources related to the documentary there. And then here are just some student reflections. A couple of the students gave us feedback that we thought was interesting to read from their perspective as well.
You guys came in right on the nose.
Nice.
Very close.
We rehearsed it thousands of times.
Right. You guys
you.
have obviously, been working together.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our next presenter is Misty Weitzel, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from Western Oregon University, talking about what she's learned from teaching a decade of race online.
I'm trying to share.
I think it's working.
I'm using up my time to discuss some of the most difficult challenges and the best practices that I've adopted after teaching race and racism in criminal justice and, as I said, anthropology for over 10 years now. And I first just want to echo what so many people in our discipline are saying right now, and that's that criminal justice departments have a responsibility to teach racial justice. I think we always have. I just think it's more obvious, obviously, today. And our criminal justice program at Western has long offered coursework in racism. The course I teach is called Social Constructions of Race. And not only do we have courses in race, obviously, we have courses in other systems of oppression too. But more recently, we're embedding these courses into our core curriculum. So I'll be teaching a new course called Race and Social Justice that will be part of the core now. And the challenges I'm addressing are ones that have to do with teaching race in general, but also just teaching it online. So I've been assessing curriculum well before the time of COVID, as I've been teaching the course since its development, which is probably closer to about 15 years now. So I know not everyone's been teaching race, or they've not been teaching it online. So my hope was that there might be something of use to people here, and hopefully I'm not just preaching to the choir. The first hurdle students might place their focus, some will focus more on genetics. I define race as chromosomal differences within the human species. Some look at phenotype. I define race as the way groups within society that appear to have distinct similarities, such as skin color, hair texture, eye color, and other physical traits, are assigned value. Some might put priority on geographic origin or ancestry. I define race as a very broad description of what they call you depending on the part of the world you come from. And then others I've kind of grouped into the socio-cultural political aspects. And an example of that might be race does not exist. It's a concept created by society that was only used to categorize some people don't want to discuss the question from that context at all. So I've had answers like a contest between individuals or animals that's carried out over a particular course or distance. When I pose the question about ethnicity, I get some similar responses, and often students will admit that they don't understand the difference between the two concepts. So my own definition of race has also evolved over the years after scouring numerous scholarly resources, and my favorite currently is Marcus and Moyes from Doing Race. So race is something that we do instead of something that we are. And again, maybe you're familiar with this, but just to kind of go over it briefly, the way they define race, and I present this both in reading materials and again in a PowerPoint presentation. Race is doing. It's a dynamic set of historically derived and institutionalized ideas and practices that sort people into ethnic groups according to perceived physical and behavioral human characteristics that are often imagined to be negative, innate, and shared, associates differential value, power, and privilege with these characteristics, and emerges when groups are perceived to pose a threat to justify the denigration and exploitation of other groups while exalting one's group to claim an innate privilege. Ethnicity similarly is doing, and it's also a dynamic set of historically derived and institutionalized ideas and practices, but it allows people to identify or be identified with groupings of people on the basis of presumed and usually claimed commonalities. When claimed, confers a sense of belonging, pride, and motivation, and can be a source of collective and individual identity. And what I really like about these definitions is the emphasis that's placed on race more commonly being ascribed, where we look at ethnicity as something more claimed. So anticipating these misconceptions about race and addressing them proactively is essential before we can move on. And moving on in my course takes us straight into examining race in a historical context. And when I say historical context, I'm coming at it anthropologically, so I mean the dawn of anatomically modern humans. I hear a lot of comments from students that suggest that race and racism can't be abolished because it's just something that has always been with us since we as humans have emerged. And this is where anthropological and later world history perspectives are useful. But it also brings me to my next challenge, and that's that students don't often enter the class with strong foundations in either biology, let alone bioanthropology, or history. And I know that sounds harsh, but there's been numerous studies that support the claims that students are not prepared for these subjects prior to entering college. And depending on their majors or your gen ed requirements, your students may or may not be taking classes that deal with these topics while they're in college. So investigating the notion that humans have always been divided by race requires some discussion around mechanisms of evolution, how humans have evolved, how we define species and subspecies in biological terms. And one might ask how we can expect students to be prepared for these discussions when these topics themselves are routinely at risk in some parts of the nation. So the way I've approached this is to devote some time to a biology and anthropology primer that provides evidence demonstrating that for as long as humans have lived and wherever they've lived, there's been some level of gene flow so that the rich genetic diversity among humans, both then and now, reflects our individual uniqueness rather than something that might be called race. Similarly, the adaptive traits we deem useful for classifying, things like skin color, are products of biocultural evolution and nothing more. And I use Nina Jablonski's TED Talk, which provides a useful explanation of what skin color really is. So biological terms like non-concordance are really important in understanding that the genes that code for one trait are different for the genes that code for another. So because I might have light skin, I may not necessarily have blue eyes. And in order for you to have a race, you have to have a concordance. So all of that to say that I don't think it's enough just to throw out the old racism biological, but to really give students a good explanation as to why it's not biological. As we move closer to recent history, we can turn our attention to race and its relationship to criminal justice more. And we examine a number of topics here, but some of them I list here. Lombroso's biological criminology. We look at slavery and the Declaration of Independence. We look at eugenics laws and their role in shaping Hitler's regime, federal housing guidelines, blockbusting, gentrification. And I wouldn't anticipate that students come in knowing details. For example, that the federal government in the 1930s drew a red line around neighborhoods they deemed risky for mortgage loans on the basis of race. But I would expect that they have some general knowledge of the premeditated mass murder of millions of innocent victims driven by racist ideology. The discouraging news is some don't. So in 2018, the Washington Post reported results from a study that showed 2/3 of American millennials surveyed in a poll cannot identify what Auschwitz is. And 22% said they haven't heard of the Holocaust or are not sure they've heard of it. So I'm not sure what that means for the younger Generation Z. And in terms of course material, I use a number of different things here, but one of the things that I still rely on are the 2 films in the Race, the Power of an Illusion series. They were produced in 2003, but they're still incredibly enlightening. I think they really resonate with students. The first one, the genetic science, is a little bit outdated now, but the historical narrative doesn't change through time. And they cover a lot of history in a short amount of time. Okay, so the third challenge is engaging students in meaningful and productive ways. Student discussion, or student-centered discussion, is a valuable means of assessment here. I provide weekly prompts for discussions with some general guidelines for posting on a discussion board. Students write an original post midweek and then 2 responses by the end of the week. But I don't routinely engage in the discussion. I want students to be able to speak freely in their own voices here so that they don't have the sense that they're being graded on the content of their responses. And I think this makes for really rich conversations among students and also creates opportunities for self-generated knowledge. So shifting from a teacher-centered to a learner-centered pedagogy. One really interesting thing that I think happens regarding the online versus the face-to-face discussions is that skin color isn't revealed. Unless a student has their picture with their name, we don't know that unless they decide to disclose that information. And I think this in and of itself is worthy of investigation, as it certainly steers classroom dynamics. Exactly how, I'm not really sure, but the thing that stands out most to me anecdotally is that no one's expected to have to speak for their race online. It's up to the student, like I said, when they'd like to reveal that or how they'd like to identify. So in this case, race can't be ascribed. And at a school like Western, where 63.4% are labeled white, I think that can be really important and possibly really beneficial. So at the end of the term, we take a look more directly at what's going on today, but we also look at what some call critical white studies from critical race pedagogy, which seeks to identify and critique the power and privileges associated with white hegemony and white normativity. So rooted in Peggy McIntosh's seminal work, the goal of critical white studies is to expose structures and systems that perpetuate and strengthen white privilege. Spending the first half of the term defining race and how it's evolved, as well as self-reflecting on the numerous ways in which we might all experience some level of oppression, provides the framework needed to examine potential positions of privilege. Because the topic can stimulate resistance, evoke feelings of resentment, guilt, or even anger, front-loading helps prepare us for these more difficult realizations. And I use Floyd's definition of front-loading as providing a substantial amount of data establishing the reality of social inequality at the beginning of the course and telling students ahead of time that they'll be engaging in difficult subjects and expect some discomfort. On a side note, I've noticed that much more these days as students are becoming more and more familiar and accepting critical white studies. I'm seeing that they're more accepting of it as it's become more a part of our mainstream vernacular. So prior to most recent racial unrest, some students would say, yeah, that was racism then, but things are getting much better now. I haven't been hearing that at all lately, but the truth is not everyone is good at recognizing race if the form isn't what we call highly personal. So, you know, in the cases of George Floyd and more recent cases, sometimes it's harder for people to recognize. So when race is classified in different means by, for example, polite racism, subliminal, institutional, and of course, systemic, I think students have a better way of understanding how it unfolds. And bringing it back to COVID, we now have some course material on systemic racism and the disparity in risk markers, care, and death rates associated with the pandemic. So after several weeks of difficult exploration, students will often end where they started, reflecting that racism is here and it's inevitable. I wish it were more hopeful. However, in the final exercise, I have students analyze their role in being an ally. In this assignment, students are presented with a list of behaviors that help situate them on a scale from active oppressor to a person that challenges systems. And in the end, the majority of students demonstrate at least some willingness to improve their roles as allies, no matter where they lie on the continuum. So that may provide some hope, or at least some confirmation for me that I'm meeting part of my course outcomes. So to sum it up, I think we need to have clear definitions of the terms that we're using: race, racialism, oppression, and more recently terms like microaggressions and white saviorism, which were terms that didn't exist when I started teaching this course. We need to have a variety of materials that are interdisciplinary, multimedia, which, you know, we talked a lot about in the previous presentations, sources that encourage intellectual, emotional, and social development. Of course, this can come in the way of readings, but it can also be video, podcasts, and music. I end my online course with a link to Sly and the Family Stone's song, Everyday People, which probably tells my students that I'm very old, but I think it's also still very relevant. So we also need to use sources that are created by people representing marginal populations for diverse voices and perspectives. We need to meet students where they're at, devoting some time to revisit things like biology and history and other disciplines outside of criminal justice is time that I think is well spent. And then front-loading the course material or prepping them for some of the more difficult learning helps pave the way for the harder stuff. We never want to lead with critical white studies. You're going to lose them right away if you start there. And then we need to provide an opportunity for self-reflection, ways for students to learn about themselves with diverse forms of assessment and peer-to-peer learning. You want to make sure to create a safe space that allows for different experiences and differences of opinion while maintaining respect. And there needs to be self-reflection on my end too. The fact that I'm a white woman of relative privilege teaching the course is not lost on me or my students. Oh, I'm hustling now. I see you, Jennifer, sorry. So I share my roles, and my roles are varied as an ally, but using a different lens. I face some levels of oppression as a female, and maybe even more and more with my age. So I can only speak from my own experience, but I recognize that I'm always situated inside rather than outside the learning community. Okay, so whether we're teaching about race itself, the online method, or the fact that we're doing it in the midst of the pandemic, I think our job is really hard. But I think if we can find ways or find it in ourselves to normalize and embrace the difficulty, our task will become a little bit easier. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Misty. That was wonderful. All right, we're going to move on to our last panelist. This is Rachel Cunliffe, I hope I said that right, who is not from Western Oregon University, as we said. I'm sorry, very sorry. From Portland State University, I believe. Correct, Rachel?
That's right, yeah.
My apologies.
No, that's okay, no problem. Let me see if I can share my
presentation.
And Rachel is going to be talking about when the class becomes the university experience, changing roles and opportunities for faculty in virtual classrooms.
Sorry, I've done something wrong here. There we go. Okay. So I'm not going to talk about anything nearly as important as what has been said. So I'm going to go very quick so that we've got plenty of time to discuss the other presentations. I teach, I'm an assistant professor in a conflict resolution program where I teach mostly about restorative justice. Before I got my full-time position in this program, I was a criminal justice adjunct. And I taught classes on the death penalty and crimes against humanity and human rights and crime control, and a lot of classes on restorative justice. And I've taught entirely online since about 2004, and it's been really interesting to notice some of the differences that I'm seeing now that I'm teaching entirely online during this COVID time. So I proposed a presentation to talk about kind of the nature of that change and the changing role of faculty in the COVID classroom. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Like I said, I'm going to whiz through it so that we don't spend a lot of time on my stuff and can talk more about the others. What's going on here? All right, so what I'm noticing about the COVID classroom is that I have far more students who are unfamiliar with or uncomfortable working online. Even the students who like learning online don't particularly like doing it when their children are in the room, or their dog, or their partner, or all three. And especially when other people are trying to Zoom in the same space, it's extremely distracting. They can't get away and be in the places where they normally would work, like computer labs or the library or cafes. And so even the students who like learning online, it's a difficult and stressful time. Frequently, students are working from home and they never come to campus. At our campus, we've been locked off campus now since March, and we've been told we're going to stay locked off until next March. So we really are now not just kind of sprinting to cover a patch, but this is actually, even for some students, this is their first year at university. It was hugely impactful for students to graduate from an online situation, and it was very difficult for some of them, having anticipated live graduation ceremonies, which didn't happen. So students lack the usual sort of visible in-person and on-campus supports, which carry the informal curriculum of the university experience, not just the sort of formality of the actual content in classes. Students have been sort of made restless by a sense of the dispersal of the university or college's place. There really isn't that feeling unless you teach an entirely online program where you've already been addressing these issues. Those of us who are teaching as kind of proxy for in-person courses are now the university, which we didn't used to be. We also have colleagues who are unfamiliar with remote and online teaching and with their changing roles and responsibilities as carriers, not just of the formal, but now the informal curriculum of the institution as well. So in our institution, oh blow, I don't know how to go back. Yeah, so in our institution, the scramble to manage was really challenging. We don't teach on semesters, we teach on quarters. And we went online just 2 weeks before the end of the quarter. So there was a lot of scrambling going on. People were sort of desperately trying to figure out how they were going to do their finals in virtual environments, having not really anticipated that that was going to happen. So we started out with everybody being just sent home really quickly. And we were locked out of our facility and away from our offices. And the equipment and library services. There was a lot of scrambling to ensure that the student services, such as registration, financial aid, admissions, degree audits, and so on, were coping. But faculty were kind of left to figure it out, how to transfer their teaching.
So those of us who already worked entirely online, we're trying to help our colleagues. Very few of us have been working in any kind of remote platform, so all of us were trying to get up to speed on Zoom to sort of see how that could be applied to the classroom kind of situation. And we have our online platform is D2L. So eventually trainings and additional supports from tech support and instructional design started to kick in towards the end of the spring quarter. And then during the summer, they kind of really geared up. But most faculty are not paid during the summer, and they weren't paid to attend these trainings either. So they were made optional. And some people did them, but some people understandably felt that that was an additional expense to them of supporting the institution. And there, as I say, there were few, if any, supports offered to faculty. Suddenly had to bear all the overhead of maintaining university contact with students. Yet to come, in my view, is a realization by the institution that classes are also the university experience at the moment, and that faculty roles are changing. So the focus was on teaching. We didn't really ever talk about what the informal curriculum should be. And there's been a lot of scrambling in this past week, for example, to produce events that students could benefit from to support them after the election. We really haven't dealt at all with the challenges of the Black Lives Matter plus demonstrations that we've had in Portland and calling out the National Guard and riots and all the rest of it, which students have been involved in. So I think we're lagging a little bit in those terms. If we talk about what the university experience is supposed to be, of course it varies campus to campus. Entirely online programs will have different stresses than small private schools where cohort relationships and learning communities which are embedded in extracurricular contact have been paramount. And different again is the large urban, primarily commuter campus with distributed buildings in a townscape, which is the place where I work. Or the Research One land-grant university with a self-contained campus and most students in student housing, commingled with departments and administration buildings. So for each of us, we have to kind of think about what was the student expecting when they came to this university, and what is the university experience at our university supposed to be. They aren't the same, and so replicating them or trying to foster them in the virtual space will of course be different. So when we think of the university experience for students, some of the things that will be common across those different settings are a notion of connection. So a connection to people, ideas, critical thinking, conversation, dialogue, people who are different than themselves. Often students are sort of forming their identity, especially the younger students on a campus. They're developing kind of their presence, the way they present themselves in everyday life on campus. They're becoming more interdependent with each other as they become more autonomous from their families. They're seeing themselves as students, coming to sort of have a sense of what it means to be a student, as well as coming to see themselves as teachers and experts in particular ways as they do group projects which differentiate them from their classmates, and become interested in different pathways through course requirements. They start to see peers as resources. They start learning about real collaboration and cooperation. Hopefully, they are learning how to civilly engage conflict in constructive ways. Some ideas about civic responsibility as they participate in governance, and also citizenship as they extend those ideas to the notion of how they're going to function as an adult in society. And of course, there's also the degree and the possible connection of their studies to an occupational pathway. But those other pieces are really, I think, more of what people think of as the experience of university, and that's what I'm trying to address here, is how we can offer those opportunities now in our classes, given that students are not really having opportunities to otherwise come together. So for those of us who are not teaching in online programs right now, our classes were primarily involved in degree-seeking purposes for higher education before COVID. And we may have given a lot less thought to other aspects of the university experience, which might be called the informal curriculum. And since these other aspects are actually strongly related to retention, it seems to me that our roles as faculty need to change so as to offer more in the way of the total university experience actually embedded in the curriculum of our courses. So for me, anyway, what I've done is look at connection. And part of the reason for that is that already I had noticed that a lot of the people who were taking my classes were trying to complete their degrees online and come to campus as little as possible. And so I was already trying to help them to connect in various ways, connecting students to myself so that they could see I was supporting their resilience and was also promoting institutional cultural values, connecting students to each other informally as well as formally through class activities, connecting students to current events through our content, connecting student funds of knowledge to our activities. By funds of knowledge, I mean the experiences students bring with them already when they come to the classroom. I wanted to know what those were and have always invited them, those funds of knowledge, into our conversations, and then connecting students to other university resources and services. So in that sense, I embody the institutional brand to at least some extent. And of course, I'm going to navigate that and negotiate it to some degree. But taking on aspects, at least, of the mission of the university as my personal mission has been important. So being reliable, so being punctual and responsive, being proactive in my outreach to students who aren't showing up. You know, it's not uncommon for students to sort of disappear for a week or two, and then what do we do about that? Because it's like molasses trying to catch up in an online course. The pace is fast. And so what I tend to do is I do proactive outreach, and I'm pretty targeted about when I start doing that. How many days have they not shown up before I'm starting to email them, eventually call them, maybe even talk to other student support services beyond my class who will do more outreach. It means I need to be somewhat familiar with the offices which provide typical services and options for students, a little bit familiar with how my course fits into their whole degree, how the university looks to them as they come into the website, what my PSU looks like to them. I don't have a my PSU. So what does students see when they come in, and how do they navigate from there to the places they might need to go? I also try and provide informal spaces for students to connect, to supplement the formal spaces. For example, I've got a student right now who's doing a pet show in the water cooler discussion space. So I have discussion spaces related direct to the course content, and then I have additional discussion spaces to support. So I have this water cooler discussion where people can just come in and do whatever they want, post, get together, chat about things. And it turned out lots of people had pets that were in their workspaces, and so we have a pet show going on in there right now. I also have workshops to support assignments, and right now I also have a discussion where we're talking about the election and what that means to everybody. So I'm trying to facilitate a kind of wraparound service to the student, realizing that students don't have the visual prompts of other offices or departments on the way to my classroom. So they're not walking past Veterans Affairs, they're not walking past registration, they're not walking past a cafe or a bookstore in order to get to my class. And so I'm trying to help them form a kind of picture of the university in their minds, which has real connections and links. And I'm also trying to help students connect with the cohesion of their programs, so they don't just keep consuming classes, but actually see kind of the structure of their degree and understand that and feel that as they're taking my classes. Helping them to So I try to get to know them holistically with personal introductions. I have email thread with every student so that we can talk. Most of them don't use them, but the few who do clearly find it very helpful. Use self-assessment and portfolio assessment. I have complex queries, lots of enrichment material that people don't have to, which they can look at do. I spent the whole first week of the quarter. Misty was talking about front loading, and I front load community building so that we care about each other, and that seems to really assist with retention and participation. And then I have various class documents in which I foster those ideas. So COVID may have inadvertently given us an opportunity to actually reclaim some ground which has been lost to neoliberal repurposing of higher education as a private advantage rather than a social good. I think there's a real chance for faculty to affect the culture of the university at the moment, which we may have not had so much in the last few years. By positioning ourselves as connectors, resist the disconnecting tendencies of decentralization in higher ed, where the student is made a consumer of fragmented services and where we've been treated as technicians and instructors rather than professional educators at the center of the university experience. Okay, sorry I went over.
No apologies. That was wonderful. And I really liked how you ended that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have some questions for all of our presenters. I will just say that I thought that about all the opportunities that we have now as faculty to be that university experience, it just reminded me that Janese and Jeff's presentation sort of gives one of those opportunities. What I miss about being on campus is, you know, staying late and wandering into a talk I hadn't planned on attending. And, you know, those are wonderful experiences. So for Janese and Jeff, do you think it's important to have both a white person and a person of color for the types of discussions that you would be having with your presentation on the 13th documentary?
That's a great question. I certainly think it helped. I don't know if it's necessary, but I think that we were very transparent about our racial identity in the conversation, which was important. And I think that we frequently just checked in with each other in front of the students, which I was really proud of. They could see us. I think we really role modeled how to have conversations about race in a mature and civil way, but still, you know, have a conversation that was tough at times.
I think that's true. I don't know that I would say it's necessary. I was interested actually to hear what Jeff thought of that. I'm not sure it's necessary. I certainly think it was very advantageous. And I will just say, if I'm being completely honest, as a white woman, first of all, in the criminal justice field, which is usually male dominated, I felt more comfortable having a person of color doing it with me, just to be sure that I was representing perspectives as best I could. That's actually part of the reason why I brought Jeff in on the police shootings originally, you know, was that I just wanted someone else there who could really validate what students are feeling that I can empathize with, but I can't actually say I feel it in the same way.
Yes. And I think, you know, Janese, you mentioned in our presentation how we talked about our journey. I feel like we did that every single time. So for all three presentations, we did want to emphasize to the students that we're not speaking for a community. I said, I'm speaking for myself and my experience, my lived experience. And I think it was also important for me and my role with so much you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion work under scrutiny right now. I wanted to tell students, I don't have a particular agenda. I'm just going to tell you my lived experience as a Black male, and this doesn't apply to everyone. So yeah, we definitely had to consider, I think, just the current national conversation on race, the current national conversation on diversity training and conversations about race when we put this together.
And I think that raises a great point, which is just that I think it's important as to interact most closely with the students to be able to acknowledge our own personal story. I don't do that as much maybe in the classroom as I should sometimes because it feels a little too personal. But I think this has been an encouragement to me to realize how much it helps if you acknowledge, hey, look, like this is my background on this is my journey, this is Jeff's, here's how they're different, but this is where we're both hoping to head, and to just be willing to take that risk a little bit while maintaining professional boundaries, of course, and all of that as well.
I have a couple other questions for you two, since you're on the screen. One is about the legal considerations for showing snippets from the full film via Zoom. Are there any concerns there? Did you do any research on that we should know about?
This is where Diane comes in. So Diane, our librarian, she, like I said, handles all the logistics for these programs. So she was able to get licensing. I think that Ava DuVernay is the director of 13th. It's on Netflix. I believe they gave an open educational license. I don't know the term, but that's a great question, and that's something that that's a great reason to partner with her, because she's able to get us access to certain videos that that it might, I won't say we'll be breaking the law, but I think that there are some of those instances where I might want to access a video, because we worked with her pretty frequently. So she handles all of that. So we're grateful for that partnership.
We actually didn't use 13th's actual image on any of our flyers for that reason. We sort of made up our own image to put with it.
And then we had another question for anyone who has used the 13th, have included True Justice in the same context. If so, how has that been received?
True Justice or Just Mercy? True Justice? I'm not familiar. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
I'm not familiar with that either, but I'm writing it down.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same story. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Hey, and then we had a question for Misty. You are teaching such powerful and important critical knowledge. Have you had students reflect in any way on how their perspectives have changed over the course?
Yeah, let me think about that. I know that's something I don't think I do a very good job of doing, but I'd like to do is to restate some of the questions that I ask at the beginning of the term more directly. I think we have so many conversations that inevitably some of the topics we've covered in the beginning will show up again in the end, and I definitely see some change in perspective among students, but it's all anecdotal at this point. It's not anything I've, have any metric information about, but it's something I should do, or I should have been doing, 15 years into it.
There's always time for more research, right? And then we have a question for Rachel. Some of the events, protests, conflicts in Portland were near campus. Has PSU not been able to bring that life experience to class discussions with students? Is there any kind of pushback on that to protect a safer university?
Thank you for the question. So our campus was vandalized the night before the election, so last Monday night, and there was a general message that was sent out, but we're going through, so our campus is very close to downtown, and we're not even half a mile from downtown. And at the moment it's substantially empty, although we, like others, have had to have international students living on campus right now. And then we also had some people who were refugees from the fires who needed places to live, and so we opened some of our halls of residence for them too. But on the whole, we're not having people on campus right now. But Homeland Security requires that international students still have in-person experiences, and so we have our intensive English language program is putting on classes for those folks. And I believe our library has been open, but right now Multnomah County just locked down again. So I'm not quite sure what's happening with that. I feel our administration has been slow to include faculty in a discussion about how we might be addressing some of these issues in classes. In conflict resolution, of course, we're talking about it all the time. Our classes are about this stuff. So this week in my Introduction to Conflict Resolution class, we're talking about communal conflict. So Black Lives Matter is one of the conflicts students can choose to talk about. And my guess is that there's going to be a few of them who will be talking about it. And I know from the students' personal introductions that several of them have been participating in the demonstrations. And I myself have been observing some dialogues between the police and demonstrators. So I've been talking about that. Someone in an earlier panel talked about how we finish up our modules. One of the ways that I finish up modules is to write a reflection at the end of the week. Like Misty, I don't participate in them. I think it makes me kind of the hub, and then students come to me like I'm kind of the arbiter of quality, and I prefer to step out of that role. So the old adage about being a guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage, I way prefer being that guide on the side. It means I don't have to be the only one who knows things in the class. So I step out and my reflection talks about those things. And one of the things I try to do is connect what people have been talking about with current affairs. And of course, they're talking about them because the kind of query that I'm asking is inviting them to talk about them, to relate the content that, you know, the particular course concepts to their own experience. Because Misty talked about having a discussion and responses. I have two discussions, one of which is on kind of the reading material, and then the other is a reflection about how that all fits with their own sort of theories of how things work. I wanted to just say one other thing about what Misty said about the online discussion environment. I teach online on purpose because it levels the discourse playing field. Since starting to teach online and seeing what the quality of the discussion in a discussion board, first of all, everybody has actually read what you've asked them to read, which makes a huge difference to the quality of the conversation. And secondly, everybody talks, which you can't contrive in a face-to-face situation, certainly not so that you know what they're saying. So that means that my international students are talking. It means that people who are slower thinkers are also talking because they have longer to think about what they might say. It means people are basically lazy. They don't write they write what they mean. And so we then have actually higher quality conversation. And you can incentivize exchange so that you actually have conversation. And instead of having kind of a prime real estate right at the front of the class where people who are quick to speak kind of dominate the conversation in a face-to-face situation, online everybody's talking. And so you just have a very rich discourse environment, a very diverse discourse environment. At PSU, you walk into a classroom and you go, wow, this is so cool. There's all these different people here. They look so different. They're wearing all this different stuff. But when you actually look at who's talking, it's not very diverse at all. When you go online, it's very diverse and very rich. So I teach online on purpose because I think it actually is a more equitable space.
Thank you. That's excellent. I just wanted to point out Jim Gravely, who asked the question about true justice, just added more context for all of us. I had HBO approval to have a showing, but we know what happened in May. So I was curious how people have used it within an online environment. If anybody has any information about getting permissions from HBO for online, please let Jim know. You can let all of us know, actually. All right. I don't see any other questions. I kept you all up even later than I had planned. All of our presenters who participated today, and all appreciate event annual. We did do something so we could all discuss criminal justice in the days as well.